What's up, everybody? Welcome to Moxie Bets, presented by Caesars Sportsbook. I'm Katie Mox, and today we're previewing the Super Bowl between the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs. Here joining us as our guest, Sia Nejad of Monumental Sports Network, CBS Sports, Sportsline, much more, currently hosting the Early Edge and the Early Wedge as well. Sia, thank you for taking time to hang with me today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I can't wait to talk Super Bowl. We've gotten some breaking news, just a lot
Yes.
going on in the NFL. I absolutely love it.
So much going on in the NFL. And I have to tell you, so we obviously both work at CBS, and there's an email chain going around right now where they want to know where all of how, exact score prediction of all of the experts. And everybody keeps replying to all. And I'm the biggest 49ers fan. And it feels like I get punched in the face over and over again because every single person has been saying that the Chiefs are going to win this game. And I literally want to be like, you don't have to reply to all. And then Emery and you came in with the Niners picks, and I'm like, yes. So I
Well,
have to say, you made my morning because it's been rough.
Well, listen, what's really interesting about that is how the line opened and where the line still is. You know what I'm saying? There's
Yeah.
certainly some sharp money coming on your 49ers. They were my preseason pick to win the Super Bowl. For
Yep.
the record, they were my preseason pick last year to win the Super Bowl. And let me just say, unpopular opinion, but if they had Brock Purdy for all four
Yep.
quarters instead of Brock Purdy plus no quarterback for three quarters,
Yep.
I think they would have beaten the Eagles and maybe won the Super Bowl last year too. So
Yeah.
I still think they're the best total unit offense and defense in football.
I couldn't agree with you more. We are going to get into that, of course. But like you said, there is some breaking news here. The Seahawks hire former Ravens coach Mike Macdonald. Do you think he's a good fit for Seattle? I mean, he is the opposite of Pete Carroll. He's only 36 years old.
Well,
He's a
so that's
baby.
It's funny you say that though, because yeah, he is a baby, and I think he's a great defensive coordinator. But a couple things here, and it relates to Washington too, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute. But I don't know that I like the defensive coordinator being the head coach, unless we know
Yeah.
he's got an offensive coordinator that is legit,
Yep.
like a Sean McVay type or Kyle Shanahan, because we know how the NFL works now. It's different, just like the NBA. It's a different league in the NBA. It's a different league in the NFL. And if you are not some sort of offensive minded guru, you're just not necessarily going to be successful. Guys like Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay, they can just sort of stamp out like warts on a team because of their offensive design. We didn't expect the Rams to be good this year. We didn't
Yeah.
expect Puka Nacua to be great this year. But Demarcus Robinson, but here we are watching this team that probably should have won a game in the playoffs. So the long and short of it is yeah, Mike Macdonald is fresh and young and new, but Pete Carroll is the youngest, whatever, 70-year-old or
Yeah.
however old he is that I've
Yeah.
ever seen in my life. So I don't know that you're going from old to young, because the way Pete Carroll projects himself,
Yeah.
he is young. I think he's really like a player's coach. And I think part of that is how young at heart he is.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree with you. And obviously, I can see there's some, you're in DC, and I see there's some Commanders memorabilia behind
Mhm.
you. So I have to ask you, Dan Quinn, now the new head coach, was the Falcons coach for about 6 years between 2015 and 2020, record of just 43-42. How do you feel about this as a Commanders fan? I just felt like there was so much momentum going into it. They hired Bob Myers, our own Rick Spielman. Dan Quinn?
I mean, your question is my reaction. The look on your face right now is my reaction, because listen, let's be honest. I think Washington now, with new ownership and with Myers and with a salary cap, I believe they have more salary cap than any other NFL team. I mean, they've got a lot going for them, a top 2 pick. So, they're probably going to land a quarterback that has high potential to succeed in the league. How did we not get Ben Johnson? It's just like,
Yeah.
as a Commanders fan, we wanted, just like I said, we wanted that offensive guru. We wanted that
Yeah.
offensive mind. And we sort of all of a sudden immediately ran out of options. And I don't know that that's Washington's fault necessarily. Like,
Right.
people don't want to, there's only so many coaching candidates. So you fall on Dan Quinn. And it's just, for me, it's just super underwhelming. I don't know whether he's a great head coach. His track record certainly doesn't speak to that. I'd love him as a defensive coordinator. As a head coach, I do think it's an improvement over Ron Rivera. I have extreme questions about Ron Rivera in terms of his decision-making skills, both off the field and on the field, in terms
Yeah.
of quarterback management and game management. I think it's just been absolutely crazy the last 2
Yeah.
years. So improvement, but it's very underwhelming.
It is, especially because it felt like this was gonna be a new era in Washington, and you
Yeah.
had all of these, incredible people involved in the process. And there was such an interesting coaching carousel going on. Like Harbaugh obviously lost out on him. He went to the Chargers. Bill Belichick is still floating around in there. And then we end up at Dan Quinn. But you mentioned Ben Johnson, obviously staying with the Lions. Do you think that's the right decision for him?
Well, I don't know what the implications were. Like, were people not meeting his salary demands? I'm not exactly, and I can't imagine that was I can't imagine that was sort of the crossroad there because I assume Washington was ready to dole out plenty of money. I think sometimes it just comes down to maybe he was really comfortable in Detroit. Dan
Yeah.
Campbell. One thing I can say about Dan Campbell, I mean, we could quibble about his decision making skills, particularly in that last game against San Francisco, but he's a motivator and he
Yeah.
has that locker room behind him. And I think Ben Johnson feels that to some degree. And he knows he's young and he's got plenty of coaching opportunities ahead of him. And for whatever reason, I think he just felt so married to the Detroit Lions situation behind that city, what they did. It's still a team that has the tools and the players to get back to where they were. So I don't know that even if Detroit fails next year, I think Ben Johnson is probably just as marketable, can
Yeah.
command just as much money. So I think honestly, this might have been a Dan Campbell Detroit City thing.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
I want to ride this thing out at least
Yeah.
one more year. And I respect that. I'm sad about it, but I respect it.
I agree with you. I think he's like, we came so close. We've built so much in Detroit in a short amount of time. I want to run this back. It reminds me of, like the Heisman Trophy winners that decide to go, but they didn't win the championship, decide to go back. It never works out the way you think it's going to. Okay. So I
No.
think he should have taken the head coaching job personally, but I
Mhm.
understand the heart in being like, I believe in this where I'm at and I want to run it back. All right. We got to talk Super Bowl now, right? Because I'm
Sure.
excited. I'm a big 49ers fan. There's a couple storylines floating around there that by the end of next week, you and I are going to be nauseated and not want to talk about anymore, but it's still kind of fresh. Let's talk about Kyle Shanahan here, right? You mentioned it. One of the best offensive minds in football, but he's got this dark cloud kind of hanging over him. And this is really a redemption or could be for him, right? He's been a part
Mhm.
of the two biggest blown leads in Super Bowl history. Obviously, the Atlanta Falcon one, we don't even have to get into that. That was the worst ever against Tom Brady. But then the 2019 season, 2020 Super Bowl, San Francisco led 21-10 entering the fourth quarter, and
Mhm.
then Kansas City came back in the third quarter and outscored them 21-0. Actually, in the fourth
Yeah.
quarter is when that happened.
Yep.
Um, that's gotta be on Kyle Shanahan's mind. I find sometimes he's a little bit too conservative, but then I'm like, well, he's been a part of two of the biggest blown leads ever.
Well, I think he's just confident in his game plan, and I think that gets the best of him. I mean, in that Atlanta game up 28-3 in the Super Bowl, obviously it got the best of him. The 21-10 comeback from the Chiefs, it was a little quirky. I mean, a lot of that had to do with Tyreek Hill. I remember there was a fourth
Yeah.
down with about 6 minutes left. I think it was
The
fourth and one.
holding on Nick Bosa. Yeah.
Oh, exactly. Oh, of course. I mean, Chiefs, let's be honest about the calls they get away with. That's a subject for another day. Listen, all teams get away with calls, but they seem
Yes.
to be magnified in Chiefs games,
Yes.
notwithstanding the Kadarius Toney offsides call, which I probably wouldn't have called. But
Yep.
nonetheless, that was an interesting game because like Tyreek Hill just made a great play. Mahomes made a great play on a fourth and long that would have really probably closed the game. Jimmy Garoppolo missed some throws to George
Yep.
Kittle late in the game that he could have thrown, but it's such a different team now. And I know you're
Yeah.
not necessarily comparing it. You're talking about Kyle Shanahan, but I
Yeah.
do have full confidence in Kyle Shanahan. The same confidence I have in Andy Reid to get receivers
Right.
in open space, whether it be Travis Kelce or Rashee Rice or some of those non-name brand receivers. I have the same confidence that he'll get Debo in space, that he'll get
Yeah.
Christian McCaffrey in space, that he'll get Brandon Ayuk in space and George Kittle. And I think that's where I see the differences in this game.
Yeah.
Well, I agree that Mahomes will, and we'll talk about this more, I know as the show goes, but I agree that Mahomes will kind of nickel and dime down the field and really he'll get a ton of completions. He'll throw for a handful of yards, but I think the skill players for the 49ers, I think that's the difference for Kyle Shanahan. He's
Yeah.
surrounded himself with so many skill players that he has
Right.
full confidence that Brock Purdy can operate the game plan and get the ball in those guys' hands.
It's so interesting. I agree with you. And even though the 49ers are the favorite in this matchup, you could see the line anywhere from 1.5 to 2. They still feel like the underdog, right? Because so
Mhm.
much money, so many talking heads, everybody is, and rightfully saying, you can't bet against Patrick Mahomes in this spot. And I understand that. I mean,
Mhm.
a lot of people learned it last year in that matchup with the Eagles, and the Eagles look like almost the better team going into it. But what I find the most interesting about this particular rematch is that it's flipped, right? In the 2019 season, it was all about the 49ers defense and the Chiefs offense. And
Mhm.
now the Chiefs offense, they've got Kelce, maybe Rashee Rice, Pacheco, but it's not that beast that it used to be. But their defense is so locked down. And then you look at the 49ers, one of the best offenses in the league, and their defense has been an issue, which is so crazy because we're the most
Yeah.
expensive defense in the league. Um, but we saw how that turned out the last time. So that leads me into my second question. Are the 49ers due, right? The Niners still rank second in all-time Super Bowl wins with 5.
Mhm.
They've been 7 times. The last one was 29 years ago. Okay. They lost back to back NFC championship games, finally won one. They lost their last 2 Super Bowls, 2012 and 2019, 2020, I guess, when it actually was. Are they due? Is this the time? I mean, you got CMC, which is the big, you talk about these difference makers, right? A lot of this 2019 team is still on this 2023 team,
Mhm.
but Christian McCaffrey and Brock Purdy and Trent Williams are different.
There's so many storylines here. You bring up Christian McCaffrey, and I think Ed McCaffrey, who was on Mike Shanahan's
Oh,
team,
yes.
when they won back-to-back Super Bowls, and I think in some capacity, Kyle Shanahan was on that staff, like in a limited offensive capacity.
Yes.
But there's so many storylines. So I think the do thing is also a storyline, right? Because we can't like put objective analysis on whether a team is due or not. The only problem I have with that, because I do think they're due, that
Yeah.
to answer your question, is that when you have Patrick Mahomes on the other side, there's like kind of no such thing because he
Yeah.
just has a way to negotiate a game plan and an offense when it matters. He just has a way to see the field that not a lot of quarterbacks can see. And in spite of the fact, it's so funny because we're talking about his skill players. Travis Kelce's 34 years old, and it's very
Yeah.
clear he's lost. He's great, right? But it's
Yes.
very clear he's lost a step. Isaiah Pacheco, a seventh round, second year player from Rutgers, seventh round. And then you got Rashee
Rutgers.
Rice, who, like, we thought would be integrated into the game plan and he'd be like maybe a second receiver for
Yep.
this team. But because all the other receivers are so bad, again, they're all NFL players. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. It's so bad relative to maybe what they thought they were paying for in like an MVS, for example. You have Rashee Rice as the primary weapon. So again, you look at the skill players and you're like, well, what's going on here?
Mhm.
But it's Patrick Mahomes. So I
Yeah.
can't say that they're due, but
Right.
I do think that they're going to find a way. I have enough respect for Kyle Shanahan in
Yeah.
spite of the bad losses in big games that he's going to figure this thing out.
You bring up Patrick Mahomes, right? And yes, because if you look at what he's working with, all the criticism of Brock Purdy calling him a game manager, right? Because he has all the weapons in the world, and how could you not be good without Debo Samuel and CMC and Kittle and Juszczyk and whoever? And
Mhm.
then on the flip side, you look at not Christian, you look at Patrick Mahomes. He's got nobody, basically, is what you just said. When you look at his top 3 weapons, they're nothing compared to what the 49ers have. Do you buy into this? Brock Purdy is only good because of his weapons. We can't compare him to Patrick Mahomes, right? Because Patrick Mahomes could be the greatest
Correct.
ever, right? And
Correct.
we'll get into, are the Chiefs a dynasty and what does this mean for him and the GOAT talk if they win this Super Bowl? But what about this criticism on Purdy?
I think I'm gonna kinda, like, split it down the middle a little bit. By the way, just before I even get into that, I mean, I'm not calling Patrick Mahomes a game manager by any means, but against the Ravens, I mean, there's a lot of games where, like, I
Yeah,
think the stat line for the
yeah.
Ravens was 30 for 39 for 241 yards. You
It's
you
one
put that
second half.
stat on Brock Purdy and everybody's like, "See? Complete game manager." You put it
Yep.
on Mahomes, and of course, it's a different story because we
Mhm,
paint Mahomes with a different brush, deservedly
mhm.
so, but I'm just saying that stat line is very game managerish. As far as Brock Purdy is concerned, I think the reason he's the starting quarterback and it's not Trey Lance and it's not Jimmy Garoppolo, first of all, I think he's talented. I think like
Yeah,
we see him throw the ball down the field. Like there's just no question about it. He has a lot of faith in his arm. He has a lot of faith in his decision making. I think the reason he's such a good quarterback and things that people aren't really appreciating is what he can do pre-snap. He's doing things pre-snap. He's understanding coverages pre-snap. And that's why Kyle Shanahan has so much faith in him. By the way, I know these S2 scores, which replace the Wonderlic test. I know we're kind of down on that because of the CJ Stroud factor and how he apparently didn't score well. But let
okay.
me just point out that we're talking about a guy in Brock Purdy that scored really high on those S2
Really?
scores.
I didn't know that.
He did. And I think that's part of the reason we're seeing him so successful in a Kyle Shanahan, specifically a Kyle
Mhm.
Shanahan offense, because Kyle Shanahan has the faith that he's going to read what he needs to read both post snap and pre snap. So when we're talking about talent and we're talking about quarterbacks, we can't just look at objectively what we see on the field. We have to appreciate what's going on pre snap and immediately post snap. And Brock Purdy is really good at appreciating those nuanced things. He's really good at digesting the information right away, which is exactly what S2 is actually
Okay.
looking for, is just the immediacy of how you can read certain things. And I think Brock Purdy is really special when it comes to that, which makes him a special quarterback, notwithstanding the fact that his talent might
Yeah.
not be as good as a Patrick Mahomes.
Well, one, I'm gonna look deeper into that. I didn't realize that he had scored so high in it because exactly what you said. As I've heard of this test all year long, is that it doesn't matter because CJ Stroud didn't score well on it and look how well he did. But I'm gonna look into that further. Thank you for bringing that up.
Mhm.
What I think is Brock Purdy's biggest challenge is that he's a little bit smaller. Now he is still, I think, 6'1" or 6'2", but we see those passes getting batted down. We
Mhm.
see people getting a tip on it or something, and that's when a lot of those interceptions that he's throwing happen. Some of them are bad, and he just throws to the wrong guy, but a lot of them are tipped or batted down and then ended up getting caught. So that's something I worry about with him. But I think he proved a lot in this postseason because one of the biggest storylines with Purdy was he can't win from behind unless he has a comfortable lead. He falls apart. We saw what happened in the Ravens game with the 4 interceptions. Again, a lot of those batted down. But the way he came back in both of these games, specifically in the NFC Championship game, if that's a game manager, if Brock Purdy in the second half, and I was watching my friends on the Green Light podcast, Kyle Long and his brother, and he said, call him a, what did he say, like a game CEO or something, or like a game
Mm.
executive at the very least, because if that's what that is, that guy was making decisions and a lot of off scheduled throws. Like this was not Kyle Shanahan's playbook.
Right. Right. And by the way, he was running a lot too. He was doing everything by the way, Kyle Long, nice name drop there.
Yeah,
I love that.
he's the best. He's on top of me.
Invite me next time. Can I
I
come
will.
over? All right, cool. Yeah, I mean, listen, Brock Purdy's doing everything he has to do to win a game. I mean, listen, if he didn't rush for several first downs or at least a couple of big first downs in the NFC Championship, they might lose that game. So, I mean, I do appreciate the fact. And by the way, at Iowa State, Brock Purdy scrambled around a little
Yeah.
bit too. He used his legs. I expect him to use his legs to some degree in this Super Bowl. So, no, I agree with you. You know, like instead of game manager, maybe we can heighten it a little bit. But again, when it comes to being a quarterback in a Kyle Shanahan system, I don't think you need to be Patrick Mahomes. Matt
Right.
Ryan proved that.
Right.
RG3 proved that. Listen, RG3 was great his rookie year because of Kyle Shanahan. Matt Ryan is a good quarterback, probably historically a little overrated in my opinion, but he was an MVP
Right.
when Kyle Shanahan got a hold of him. So, I mean, I think when you're talking about a Kyle Shanahan offense, a game manager is just fine as it turns out.
Well, and look, we've had this exact same team with Jimmy Garoppolo. We've had this exact same team, with a few different quarterbacks, and they weren't this good. And maybe some of that is CMC. But all right, let's look at the others. Let's ask the question that every talking head is arguing about right now. One, if the Chiefs win this, are they a dynasty? Are they already a dynasty? Because I guess if you look at the 1990s Cowboys, they won 3 titles in a couple seasons. We've got the Chiefs now going to their 4th Super Bowl in 5 years. Are they already a dynasty? Will this solidify them as a dynasty? And will this solidify as Patrick Mahomes is the greatest of all time?
Ooh, okay. So it won't solidify that Patrick Mahomes is the greatest of all time. He's got a lot of work to do there. As far as them being a dynasty, I think they're pretty much already there. I mean,
Yeah.
listen, generationally, we always have or I should say, people have different definitions of what a dynasty is. But I'm pretty comfortable at this point, given how tough the AFC has been, especially over the last 5-6 years. I mean, this is a really good run. And honestly, I don't think they need to win this Super Bowl. But if they do, I don't think it's really any question that they're a
Yeah.
dynasty. I think you could make the argument that they're not if they don't win the Super Bowl and they don't get back. I will say this. I just did a show, FFT DFS with Mike McClure. He pointed out on that show that the Kansas City Chiefs have an extremely young team and young defense. I know we think of like Travis Kelce when we think of them, but this is a very young team, a very young core. And that means Patrick Mahomes, even though he's commanding quite the salary, which sometimes the teams depreciate when you have the quarterback that finally got paid. This is a young enough team that can succeed for the next 2-3 years. So look out, because the Kansas City Chiefs, if you want to call them a dynasty now, I kind of agree. but
Yeah.
they're going to solidify that over the next few years.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, one, I think the 49ers will win this game, can win this game. Will I be shocked if the Chiefs win this game? Absolutely not. I mean, I'm actually shocked, which I can't even believe I'm saying this. I'm shocked that they're even in the Super Bowl by the way that they played this year. But again, Patrick
Yeah.
Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce in the playoffs. It's just a different animal, and they turned something else on. Speaking of, this is an interesting Super Bowl. You've got two of the best tight ends in the league who are very close friends that have the tight end university together, Kittle and Kelce.
Mhm.
It's just the second Super Bowl ever with opposing tight ends entering with 1,000+ receiving yards for the season, including the playoffs. And that also happened in 2019, and that had Travis and Kittle in as well. Who do you think is the better tight end right now? Because they're very different.
They are very different. I would probably say George Kittle at this point because we've seen Travis Kelce kind of lose a step a little bit. Now, Travis Kelce, speaking of like pre-snap stuff, like I was talking about Brock Purdy and post-snap, like clearly he is in sync with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
So it's hard to kind of compare the two, but I would think if we switch teams, okay, and George Kittle was on the Kansas City Chiefs, I think he would be, I'm guessing, he would be, because he's a smart guy, he'd be just as in sync with Patrick Mahomes. But the difference is now at this point in George Kittle's career, he can still do the yak. He can still
Yeah.
do stuff after the catch. And I'm not so sure you're not going to see Travis Kelce far down the field
Yeah.
as much as you are George Kittle. So I think George Kittle has a little bit more to offer, a little bit more dynamic in terms of picking up yards after the catch. But they're both great, obviously. If I'm starting a team right now and I have to draft a tight end, George Kittle I'm drafting mostly because of age. I'm drafting George Kittle before Travis
But
Kelce.
he's also more versatile. I feel like Kelce is more like a flashy wide receiver, but of course, like a big body. Like he's not
Mhm.
blocking and doing things that George Kittle is doing. And the reason why, and we'll talk about this when we talk about our bets, Kittle's been so kind of boom or bust in the prop and the fantasy market is because sometimes he's that yak guy, and sometimes they just use him primarily for blocking. We saw him pancake Aiden Hutchinson
Yeah.
last week. I mean, a tight end. It's
Ruined
insane.
him.
He
I
ruined
watched that
him.
like 3 or 4 times in a row. I'm like, this is unbelievable.
Right, and I was watching, Julian Edelman on a podcast or something recently, and he was saying a lot of the tight ends in the league right now, he would say more H-backs, and I think that George Kittle is more of the traditional tight end that really does everything.
Mhm.
But I feel like, one, let's talk about the game, right? San Francisco are favored by 2 at this point on Caesars, total 47.5. We're on the same page here, right? 49ers money line. Do you bet it now, or do you think that this line move changes and we'll get better value later? Does it cross through 0? Does it go to a pick 'em?
I don't think it crosses through 0. I think it might close at 49ers -1. So there's certainly the I would say a probability that you'll get 49ers money line at a better price than, let's
Yeah.
say, -130 where it is currently, or -125. I think you could see 49ers -1 with a money line at like -120 potentially before kickoff, because the Chiefs are going to receive some steam.
Yeah.
I just refuse to believe that this line isn't going to go down a little bit. So yeah, I'm on the 49ers money line. I actually haven't bet it yet because I
Right.
am waiting for a better
Yes.
price. It's not like this is going to get out of control and I'm like all of a sudden it's
No.
going to be -3 and the money line is going to be like -155. That's just not going to happen. So I have the luxury of waiting in this case.
Same exact. I'm doing the exact same thing that you are. I've seen this at -120. It's at -130. I'm just kind of waiting to see where it goes, because if it does get down to a pick 'em, we'll get better odds with that. Or if somehow, I mean, right now all of the bets are on the Chiefs. It's something like 76%, but bigger money is starting to come down on San Francisco, which I think is starting
Hmm.
to level this out a little bit. And you
Hmm.
got to think California 49ers, it's very close to Las Vegas. I think a lot of books are expecting a late rush, maybe a 49ers money to come in, but right now it's all Kansas City. All right, we're going to talk props when we come back. You're watching Moxie Bets. Don't go anywhere. Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words: Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the type of benefits only Caesars can offer: hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. Welcome back, everyone, to Moxie Bets, presented by Caesars Sportsbook. Here with Sia Nejad of CBS Sports and the Monumental Sports Network, and we're going to give some of our favorite player props for the Super Bowl between the 49ers and the Chiefs. What is your first prop?
So I'm going to go with something that I think is starting to get popular, and I think it's for good reason. I'm going with Brock Purdy over 11.5 rush yards.
Let's
Listen,
go.
Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, first of all, we've seen this guy scamper and scramble the last two games. We know he can do it. He did it at Iowa State. And we're going to listen, the Chiefs pass rush, even though they're down one of their key pass rushers who tore their ACL, unfortunately, they're still going to get pressure on Purdy. And when things break down, he's a lot less shy to run and just grab that first down, grab 5 or 6 yards. I honestly see like they're not going to be designed rushing attempts, but I see probably three, maybe 3 to 4 potentially, but at least 3 times where he has to rush out of the pocket. I think he eclipses this 11.5 pretty easily.
I love that. And after what we saw last week, hammering that all day long, I'm looking at Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, the biggest sucker bet you could make is Christian McCaffrey for an anytime touchdown. I've seen it anywhere from minus 240 to minus like 400. So, guys, don't do that. But if you do want to get in on the CMC action, which I think that he potentially could be the MVP of this game, I would look at him to have 2+ touchdowns. That's at plus 250, or a first half anytime touchdown at plus 120. So he's had back-to-back games, Sia, in the postseason with 2 touchdowns. So one, he's already done that twice this year. And if you look at his splits between the first half and the second half, he's got 11 rushing touchdowns, 4 receiving touchdowns in the first half compared to just 3 and 3 in the second half in the regular season. Obviously, how you beat Kansas City's in the ground game, this is going to be a Christian McCaffrey game, but maybe just take him for 2 or take him in the first half instead of laying the minus God knows what for an anytime touchdown. All right, what's your second prop?
I'm gonna go with Isaiah Pacheco. Listen, I thought
I love
last
him.
week that we were gonna, by the way, over his rushing yards, 65.5. I'm surprised it's this low. I think in some markets, maybe it'll creep up to 68, 69.5, but it's 65.5 pretty much everywhere right now. The red carpet was rolled out for David Montgomery last week. Like, what was even going on there? Like, I thought it was going to be a Jahmyr Gibbs game because he's so much more dynamic. And granted, Jahmyr Gibbs got a little bit on the
Yeah.
ground, mostly because Chase Young decided to jog instead of actually play football. But with all of that said, I think if David Montgomery can run up the middle, we know you can run on the San Francisco team. Unfortunately, the defense has wilted a little bit. I think this is an Isaiah Pacheco game in large part. So 65.5, I see maybe 1 or 2 runs that like maybe eclipse the 10, 12-yard mark. And given that that's probably going to happen and that he's probably going to get around 16, 17 carries, I think we see a 7 in front of his number, 70 plus.
It's been hard for me to watch the 49ers run defense. Chase Young better figure it out. I think he's one of the biggest problems they have on the edge there. But
Yep.
yes, hammer the running backs against the 49ers. I definitely think that is a good bet. I'm going to look at Patrick Mahomes here. I'm going to take him over on his pass attempts. It's at 36.5. You can find it at minus 129. Yes, everything that you just said is perfect. The how you beat the 49ers is through the run. That's where they're weaker. But I still think that this Kansas City defense is a pass-first offense. Offense. When you look at Patrick Mahomes and Kelce and kind of what they were able to do to the Ravens in the first half, they still want to throw the ball. He's still going to do that. So he has hit over this number in 2 or 3 postseason games and in 63% of games that he played this season. And we look at the Niners, in 90% of their games, they allowed exactly this number at 36.5. I do think if we think the 49ers are going to win this game, and it's going to be a shootout and a tight match like this, I think that Patrick Mahomes is going to be throwing the ball. So I'll take him over on his attempts. And as a 49er fan, I'm not looking at completions and I'm not looking at yards. I'm just going to try.
I love that.
What's your last prop?
All right, I'm going to go. This is a sneaky one. Are you ready,
Ooh.
Katie? Are you sitting down? Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
She is, in fact, sitting down. I can confirm Deebo Samuel, most receiving yards in the game at plus 425. Ladies and gentlemen, he's only got 4 to compete with, right? Christian McCaffrey,
Yeah.
Brandon Ayuk, Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice. I mean, that's really the group we're talking about here. I think Christian McCaffrey is a pretty big long shot there. So we really got 4 people he's competing with. And we know what we're going to see with a Kyle Shanahan offense. We're going to see Deebo get it in the short area in the passing game. What can he do after the catch? The yak is so good. And even though Travis Kelce gets a bunch of targets, I do think he'll be limited after the catch. Rashee Rice, he had a bunch of targets, a bunch of catches last week. He didn't even eclipse 60 yards. Deebo Samuel is the type of guy that in this game could have 5 catches. He could break 1 or 2 of them for 60 yards. Plus 425 is too high for a guy that dynamic and a guy who's healthy and is going to be a focal point of this offense.
I love this, and I would have never thought about it because, yes, one, the 49ers, all their attention is going to be on stopping Travis Kelce. So you got to hope that he doesn't have a big game. And then outside of him, who else is it? And they lean on Deebo Samuel when they need to get things done. You look at the second half of the NFC Championship game, it was get the ball to Deebo, have things go real quick. I mean, he is, we talk about CMC, but I think that Deebo is one of the biggest difference makers on this team. So I love that. I'm going to look at George Kittle. I'm wearing my Kittle shirt
Nice.
right now, over 36 and a half receiving yards in close, important games, right? When you're kind of passing between the numbers here, reliable tight ends are going to be everything. Kelce and Kittle are going to be huge in this game. And like we said earlier, Kittle has been a little bit boom or bust because he has been such a good blocking tight end, but he's been a beast in this postseason. And a lot of his bigger performances, of course, have come without Deebo Samuel. So I think if Deebo Samuel gets the most receiving yards, then maybe this doesn't hit. But I still think that it's a little bit low here because when the pocket starts to collapse, Kittle is Purdy's safety valve. He
Mhm.
looks exactly to see where Kittle is. We know that this Chiefs team can get pressure up front. And so when I look back to all those packages from the last time where Kittle's on the sideline being like, I will be back with a vengeance. You're
Yes.
not going to get the best of me. 36 and a half receiving yards. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's go. I
That's where I'm
love
at.
that.
All right. Well, look, before we go, we got to do our Mox locks. It's the one thing you are absolutely taking to the window. I think we're on the same page here. We're going 49ers money line, but we're not taking to the window until we get the best odds.
That's right. We're not taking it to the window until we get the best odds. We'll probably end up getting this at like minus 120 money line. By the way, you're wearing the Kittle shirt. I'm wearing the shirt with the 49ers colors. We are
Nah.
backing the San Francisco 49ers here. They are due, but I think they have enough talent, especially on the outside, break enough runs, enough receptions to get this thing done.
Bang, bang, Niner gang. Happy to have you on our side, Sia. Always sharp, always amazing. Why don't you let the people know where to find you? Because you're all over the place. You got the early wedge, you got the early edge, you got monumental. Like, talk to me.
You said it. Yeah, I'm on Monumental Sports. It's a show called By the Book, Monday through Friday at 5:30. A betting show I do with Megan Macdonald. I'm on, of course, the Early Wedge every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. The Early Edge, I'm hosting that every single morning at 10 o'clock in the morning on the Sportsline channel. Doing a lot. Sirius XM every Saturday in the evening, talking all things sports. So yeah, I am pretty much everywhere. If you follow me on Twitter at Sia Nejad, I
Mhm.
pretty much retweet everything, including this show when it's out. So you can follow me very easily if you follow me on Twitter.
I love that. And that is at SIANEJAD, Sia Nejad. Thank you so much for joining us today. Can't wait for us to cash our Niners tickets. I also have futures on the 49ers. So, like, let's just win it all, Sia. Let's
Let's
just win
just
it all.
win it all. I'm in.
This has been Moxie Bets presented by Caesar Sportsbook. Don't forget to follow us on social as well at Moxie Bets. And we'll see you next time.